We need to start the webinar. There we go.
Okay. I'll call us to order at 5 o'clock Pacific time. Do you want to move to approve the agenda, Julie?
Move.
All right. I second it, so that's approved. Is there any, Carol, do we see any public? Hold on.
Oh, there's one. We have one attendee.
Rana,
Mhm.
all right, if you're here, if anybody wants to speak in public comment, raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll just assume you're here to watch the meeting. Okay, no one's raising their hand, so we will move on to the only discussion we have, right, John?
Yes.
Okay, which is about the tennis courts and parking structure. So turn it over to you. Oh wait,
We did just get a raised hand, Ty.
yeah, sorry. Who is it?
Kyla.
Oh, Kyla. Okay, Kyla. Go ahead, Kyla. Well, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. My
Sure.
name is Kyla, and I'm a teacher at Emerson Elementary School. I've been teaching for 12 years and have 4 children in BUSD schools, including Willard and Berkeley High School. I'm a proud person of color and trilingual. I love working in Berkeley. I love my community. I love the families and the students. And I'm really proud to be a Berkeley teacher. I'm really concerned with the status and current situation with our building. And I just want to put it on everybody's radar that our building at Emerson is in need of some serious TLC. I just want the best for our families and for our kids and for them to feel proud to come to school every day. Currently, I have a lot of things that need to be fixed in my building, in my room personally, and right outside my room because of flood damage in the past and because of the lack of heat and hot water. So I just wanted to put that on the radar, and hopefully at some point the elementary schools in BUSD will get some of that Measure G money. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being here, Kyla. And as I assume you know, that nothing about Emerson is on our agenda for tonight, but thank you for being here and for making those comments. And I'm sure our staff is taking them into account. And
Thank you.
okay. All right. So now we'll turn it over to you, John.
Sure. Thank you. Let me share my screen here. I said I tried to keep this relatively short, but meaningful nonetheless here. So let me see if I can go to present. Okay, so we already have a project that's been board approved to build the, well, let me back up actually. So plant operations, as we all know, in December, we received some preliminary reports that were then finalized in January, which led to the closure of plant operations at 1707 Russell, 1720 Oregon Street. Not that this committee needs the background, but just for those watching, this facility, it opened in 1915 as Edison Middle School, ceased operations circa 1935. It was used as the curriculum development center for a long time and then plant ops, but really it permanently supported maintenance, all the workshops and storage, 40+ district vehicles, the purchasing warehouse, the nutrition services warehouse, print shop, facilities offices, and then other district support offices such as Nutrition Services Administration, Cooking and Gardening, our CMs and our PMs. There were a myriad of different programs that were housed here. In December of 2021, it was permanently closed due to environmental and structural issues. So we've talked a little bit about relocating plant operations, and I sort of put together just a really high level, what did we need to do? And I did this in the very beginning. Some of these items are complete, like locating a temporary receptor facility for the administrative offices. We're already moved in. In progress, we're still actively searching, but also negotiating a lease for a receptor facility for all of plant ops, for all of the vehicles, the equipment, the walk-in refrigerator and freezer, et cetera.
John, can you just say what receptor facility means?
Sorry, yeah, just basically a facility for us to go to, a facility that will receive us. Basically something that is appropriately sized and really importantly has the appropriate level of power that we need, but then also the number of surface parking spaces, et cetera. And right now it's been really difficult. The market is just really dry as far as commercial warehouse space. So moving forward, we've determined the space requirements for future plant operations. What do we actually need? We've determined several locations, possible locations. We've put together a rough order of magnitude of pricing for each one of these. We have identified considerations for each site, and I'm sure that there are more to be considered. We've discussed the options with some of our internal stakeholders. Really, it's been our different departments, our executive team, our labor partners, as well as some of the possible impacted facilities. We've discussed, we're in the process now of discussing these options with subcommittee, and then we would need to develop a project for permanent plant operations and present that recommendation to the board. So one of the things that I did here as some feedback was to try to develop a decision-making matrix to help you all kind of work through this. And when I first started to create that, what I noticed was we didn't have the criteria for that decision-making matrix, although I knew what that was. And the initial presentation I realized was sort of jaded in the sense of that, of course, I have my own biased opinion of where I think we should go, and I didn't want to do that. So I tried to create just a really high level Pew matrix of this, thinking about what are the big items that we would need to discuss. And I saw those as costs, the timeline associated with moving into them, what I perceive as the community impact. And the community impact I based off of the zoning, whether or not, or who the governing authority is, because that does play into it, and then the student impact. The student impact was brought into this because, and we'll go to the next slide, but on this, and I'll come back, if you remember, when we developed the project list for the bond, we had developed guiding principles and a criteria for project consideration. So I thought it was really important to sort of measure each of these projects against the principles, as well as the criteria, to see that it touched, whether or not it actually touched those. So the 4 sites that we looked at, the first one was, we were asked to look at if there was a possibility to share the corporation yard with the city of Berkeley. I didn't think there was, just from a sizing perspective, but I actually did have some good conversation with the director of public works over there. And we did try to put our heads together and work around it. And at the end of the day, it simply does not fit. So moving down, what I tried to do on this matrix was I tried to sort of color code them, green being the most favorable, yellow being midline, and red being high. And if we look at the first item, well, we looked at rebuilding at Oregon and Russell Street. We looked at rebuilding transportation, and I can go into that a little bit of what it would take and why it costs as much as it does. And then also incorporating it into the design of the Milvia Street project. The Milvia Street project is the 2-story parking garage that has been approved by the board, which is 2 levels of parking, approximately 240 spaces, doubling the parking at Berkeley High School, and then tennis courts on the roof. So when we looked at the cost, rebuilding at Oregon and Russell, and we actually think this might be a little bit low, but the ROM that we have right now is somewhere between $65 and $70 million. The timeline on that is 7 to 10 years. And the reason for that is, 1, we have some environmental issues that we need to mitigate. 2, the Oregon Street building, as well as a few of the other buildings, are actually on the historic registry. So we're going to have to contend with that. There's also the underground river that we have to deal with. And then just trying to make this work in a way that it really complements the community, but also serves the needs that we would have to operate as plant operations. The governing authority on this is City of Berkeley. Again, I put this here and I realized later this was really for my own edification, but the reality is there, whether it's City of Berkeley or DSA, they come in about the same. Each governing agency does have its own challenges to work with, and it's our design partner's job to work through those. When we think about Oregon and Russell Street, I put it in the red because it is a residential neighborhood, and plant operations does have a lot of traffic, a lot of noise. We have large delivery trucks. We have semi trucks coming in and out of there for purchasing and nutrition services warehouse. And then we also have the constant inflow of maintenance vehicles. Additionally, plant operations, one of the biggest challenges around the zoning here is that the most we can fit is 44 vehicles. And the city of Berkeley really likes to see with any new construction now, what they actually require is that we not only have the amount of parking that we need for those district vehicles, but that we would also have the amount of parking that we would need for the employee vehicles. So we would have to figure out a way, and it would probably be mechanical lifts to actually double the parking over at Oregon and Russell Street. And then when I considered the student or the criteria, as well as our guiding principles, it did impact our operational deficiencies, but overall there was no student impact with this project. Rebuilding transportation, we're somewhere in the ballpark, and this is really a ROM, and it's a short ROM on that, but of 80 to 90 million. One of the biggest challenges that we would have with doing this is the buses themselves, we can't put in a garage. They won't make the turning radius. We know that we need almost two levels of parking garage to make all the spaces work on that size of a footprint. We would essentially have to construct a superstructure, a two-story garage on concrete stilts above the existing parking lot. We can't go down over there because with where that is on Gilman, we're so close to the water. The water table is really, really shallow compared to anywhere else in the city. As you move further east in the city, the water table gets deeper. We will contend with water elsewhere, but not like we would there. So going down isn't an option. Rebuilding that, so I priced that in the red because it is the highest. Rebuilding, we're thinking in addition to the superstructure, we would actually have to knock down the existing building that's 10 years old now and rebuild, because what's there, it has just enough room for transportation. And the way that it works out is between the warehouses and the workshops and the different storage areas that are needed in plant ops, we need an additional 24,000 square feet. So we would actually be required to rebuild not only on its existing footprint, but pushing into that green space that's along Gilman there. The community impact I put as low because of the zoning. The zoning there is light industrial, so there wouldn't be too much community impact. The governing authority on that would be City of Berkeley, and I don't know how they would feel about that tall of a structure there. So that does remain a little bit unknown, but I think it has the least community impact overall. And then when I asked about student impact, when I really looked at it, this is not a site that students would ever visit or gain any benefit from, other than the ancillary benefit of the support services that we provide. So I did have to mark it no. The third idea was to incorporate into the design of the Milvia Street project, which is, again, the 2 stories of parking that's going there plus the tennis courts. We looked at this, and what we determined was we could take the 2 levels of teacher parking that are already in the plans. We can move those underground, and then we can add 2 levels of high clearance above that, and then still put the tennis courts on the roof. On that first level, the reason that we would need the high clearance is in addition to the down and up ramp for the lower levels, you would have a loading dock for a semi to actually back in. You would have the ramp to go up for all the maintenance vehicles that need that high clearance. But in the middle, essentially, of that whole property, basically where the ramps are surrounding it, and it's all fully enclosed, we have enough room to house the purchasing warehouse, the nutrition services warehouse, the loading dock, and then all of the workshops. On the upper level, we would have enough room for 90+ vehicles, which would take care of not only all of the maintenance and grounds vehicles, but it would also take care of all their personal vehicles. Plus, it would provide for a small break room for staff. There's room for the 5 small offices that would be needed there, and it would all fit. This came in much lower. The ROM for this actually came in at 25 million, and I'll talk about why it says 25 to 30 in a moment. The community impact we labeled as mid to high because this is mixed downtown use. While it's a lot of businesses downtown, there are a lot of residents, both apartments and condos. There's even a few single homeowner or single homes there as well, single family homes there. This will be a DSA project because the tennis courts are going on the roof. And we labeled this as yes on student impact, not because plant ops creates the student impact, but this project already had a positive student impact by creating the tennis courts for the Berkeley High. The reason why it's labeled as 25 to 30 million on the ROM is the ROM actually came in at 25 million. But what it doesn't incorporate into the project is the 10,000 square feet of office space that we need in addition. If we were to rebuild at Transportation or rebuild at Oregon Street and Russell Street, we can include all that 10,000 square feet of office space in there. There's simply not room to do it at the Milvia Street project. So working with our commercial broker and factoring it on the high end of up to $5 per square foot, we estimate the cost of a purchase of a building to be $5 million. That being said, this would free up the Russell and Oregon Street complex for many different things that would include not only a sale, but the possibility of even maybe doing a land swap with our local agency who can then repurpose those buildings, turn it into a park. I won't profess to know what they would do with them. So, but it does create a little bit more opportunity and a little bit more flexibility with what we would do with that site. So with that, and again, these were our principles and criteria of what we use to really decide how we picked projects to go into Measure G. So I will stop sharing and I will entertain any questions.
Well, before we do, I'll turn over to you, Julie, for first questions, but except for this question, which is, can you just give us a little more about what you're asking us to do?
Yeah,
tonight?
so initially our conversation was around when we, excuse me, when I looked at it through a more biased lens, I really believed that putting it into the Milvia Street project was the right solution. I tried to approach it this way, where it's really not biased, and it still works out where it shows to me that the Milvia Street is the logical location for it. Now, that being said, there'll be some political challenges, and I recognize that. And the challenges that are presented to the neighborhood in regards to shadowing, to light, to noise, to pollution, you know, regardless of where we build, we're going to go through the California Environmental Quality Act, the CEQA process. And CEQA is not going to tell us you can or can't do it. What CEQA is going to dictate is the mitigation strategies we need to put into place.
But it's
So
not taller, is it? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It'll be roughly 12 feet taller than what we originally anticipated because of the high clearance. Now, it's a great question. But that being said, what I'd like to do is move to the board for approval to actually put it at Milvia. But I wanted to have this discussion with the subcommittee first.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you so much for that whole presentation. Julie, why don't you go first?
Thank you, John, for the presentation, and thanks for the matrix. That was helpful. I think it's pretty on target, though I would question a couple of the colors. I think putting green on the parking lot for the Milvia when it's going to be a student benefit regardless. It was already there.
And I tried
the
to
project itself
that.
does not add a student benefit. I think the project itself could potentially be seen as a challenge just because of the traffic that might be coming in and out. But I think overall, I don't have a challenge with that. I guess my questions are 25 to 30 million for that includes pricing out underground parking, which is actually quite expensive.
No, it's a $25 to $30 million add of the existing project. So I'm sorry, I wasn't clear with that. So, and the reason that it shows it that way, Julie, is because the board has already approved the project and the budget. So this would be an add. I'm sorry.
It'd be an additional 20 to 30 million. Okay, because I was like, whoa, that's like underground parking itself is like 40,000.
Yeah, it would be great if we could do the whole project for that.
Yeah, so I guess my questions are, have you talked with the city to get a sense of what their support or resistance is going to be? Because it's not really the ideal use of what I think the city of Berkeley would like to see in the heart of downtown. So I'm just curious on whether they're like, yeah, we understand, or like, what are you doing? And then the other question in relation to CEQA is often often we do neg decks because we're also doing, you can't do that with this project,
No.
right? So,
And we're not with the parking structure either.
Wait, sorry,
even
what's
with
it? So can you just say what that is? What you
Yeah.
just referred to?
So with CEQA, because we're a government agency, we have as long as we meet the criteria, we can do a negative declaration, we can do a categorical exemption, we can do a mitigated negative declaration or a mitigated declaration. Because of the nature of this project, even before we thought of adding plant ops into it, knowing that it's going to have an impact to the community, we've already committed to doing an environmental impact report on this, where the CEQA consultant would actually come back and say, hey, look, when it comes to lighting, you need to do this. When it comes to noise, right, you need to try to limit the traffic to this. Look at traffic flow. How do we get people to come in and go out? Where do the curb cuts go, et cetera? So we would have every intention of still continuing to do the full environmental impact report and actually do a mitigated declaration on this, meaning we're going to listen to that survey or that consultant that tells us, hey, you know what, you're going to have these deliveries coming in. You need to limit your delivery hours between 9 and 3 or 12 and 2, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, right? But with your lighting, you need to only have the tennis courts lights on between these hours, et cetera. We're committed to doing that. The conversation with the city has only been around so far the actual parking structure. And part of the reason for that, well, there's two. First of which is Julie, you asked me to do it and I got COVID, so it hasn't happened, and I'm sorry. But
you all better?
I do, thank you.
Thank you.
But the second is really because we're not really changing the type of building that we're using, that we're building. Now, we're changing the use in the sense of that it's no longer just staff vehicles. What we're bringing in our maintenance and our grounds vehicles as well. But the maintenance and grounds vehicles, for the most part, the majority of them, when they leave for their shift, they're not back till the end of their shift. Additionally, so we do have to have the conversation, but I just want to let you understand my thinking. Additionally, from a service perspective, it actually helps us because of where we're located. We're more centrally located in the city. I also had conversations with Juan, that goes over at the high school, about how he felt about it. And he was actually really supportive of it because, one, he's like, hey, we'll get quicker service. You guys are across the street. But two, he understands that at the end of the day, the teachers and the staff, all of the educators at Berkeley High School are still getting the parking that the board committed to giving them. But it's really a more efficient use of our dollars because to add on to this, as you see from a cost perspective, is minimal compared to building something new elsewhere. He had some concerns around how do we deal with security and stuff. And I gave him some examples of the things that we've already been considering, and we're working with our bridging architect on those. Speaking with Matt Meyer, president over at BFT, he completely supported this as well. He had no issues with it just because of the fact that our parking that we're committing to the BHS staff remains the same. We're not taking anything away. So he was fully on board with this. And he sees the benefit to having the print shop there, to having maintenance there, but also to having them just a lot closer to what he needs for the high school.
So, I mean, I anticipate the challenges being that it is a semi-residential and the towers that eventually will go there are there, and that it's a bike boulevard on Milvia.
Yeah.
Even a more dedicated bike boulevard than it's been. So around mitigations of the ebb and flow of the traffic of the vehicles is something I assume will come up.
Yeah, it will, but I don't know that it's going to be as difficult to mitigate as we think. And the reason I say that is we run essentially 43 vehicles if you include the print shop and the warehouse, et cetera, right? All the vehicles. And for the most part, those vehicles actually leave that facility once and come back once. Mm-hmm. There's not a constant in and out. There are some, like some of our leads who actually come back a lot more often than others to plant ops, or they might be working on a project and they have to go back to get different things or fabricate things. But for the most part, once they're out of there, they're out of there. So when I talked to maintenance about it, because I did have a conversation with maintenance, but also with L21, with Steve Collins, and we really see it as an advantage in the sense of that our biggest customer, if you will, right now for maintenance is the high school, just because of the sheer size of it. So it actually improves the impact in the sense of there's less commuting, there's less drive time, et cetera, because we're not putting them across town. So it sounds like a stretch, but these are the little things that because we really tried to consider this from the biggest thing, which was the money and the timeline, down to the smallest minutia. But I kept the decision matrix as small as I did, because when I really started to look at even the small things, I felt like I was leading the decision, and I didn't want to do that, right? I wanted to have this conversation.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, John. I agree with Julie on doesn't seem right to put the student benefit green for the park for Milvia Street.
Yeah, and I hope you understand why I did that. I was very honest about it. It was just, it is what it is, right? I just didn't want to be less than transparent with you.
Well, yeah, no, but I think.
But it's not a
Julie's right
benefit of the project. It's a benefit of the existing project we already approved.
It's not it's not a reason to put all the stuff that you're talking about. It's not a reason to change the project in the way that you're talking about. It's not going to benefit students to have.
No, it's just where we're spending our money is what I was trying to really show there. Is where we're spending the bond dollars is adding into a project that is benefiting students. And maybe that's the way to say it, is it's adding into a project that is already benefiting the student body. Yeah,
but the point of the matrix is the point of putting a green square there is to say this is a thumb on the scale for that option as opposed to some other option. And the fact that the project as it exists is benefits students is not a reason to put this project there as opposed to some other project, just because the project as it already exists benefits students.
I mean, if that's the case, you'd put green with the transportation yard, which provides all the transportation for our students.
Yeah, but it didn't fall into that criteria. So I understand where you guys are coming from. Point well taken. I appreciate it. I was just trying to really look at the projects and compare it back to those guiding principles and the criteria.
No, which is great. I love them. I think the matrix is great. It's super helpful. I had the same reaction. It's just that one square I think is just a little misleading. I wouldn't put that one in the green. To me, it's neutral with respect to students, the Milvia Street project. I may be slightly in the way that Juan was talking about, if it really helps Berkeley High to have them across the street, but I would basically say that's neutral. What about and then where are we going to get this money from?
So we have been working on the cash flow on the bond and looking, and obviously there is going to be project impact, but a good portion of this 25 to 30, we believe we can actually trim out of the existing projects that are in infrastructure. And the way that we trim that is not necessarily by canceling things that need to be done. It's because we've already begun to beef up and make our preventative maintenance programs a little bit more robust to stretch the extra 5 years or 10 years out of different systems.
Okay.
There will be an impact though. There's no way around.
Well, I know. I mean, I guess, yes. And that's true of anything, because because we had to close down a facility, we just have to do it. And it's going to be a big cost. So I appreciate the creativity and thoughtfulness and looking at all these different options. I guess I had another question. Not so much a question, but just a skepticism about how much we're going to get for the, I don't know if Julie has any insight into this, but how much we're going to get for the Oregon Street.
Oh, I didn't even speculate, because honestly, Ty, I don't know that we would get very much. I don't know what the land is worth in the condition that it is. I think it's more valuable to us as a potential land swap with some governing agency.
but even there, only for like maybe a park or something, but anything that's gonna have to be built is gonna be no less expensive for anybody else than it is for us, which is pretty prohibitive.
Correct.
So I know you weren't factoring that in, but, it's unfortunate, but that's not gonna be a way to offset the cost of this in any real way, right?
No.
Okay. So if this goes to the board for approval, then that becomes, it's as approved as the current project is. It's the board saying, yes, add this
That
to
is
the
correct.
project.
Yeah.
I'm about to sneeze. Go ahead. Julie, is there anything you want to say?
So kind of going to the trade-offs in relation to the bond. Because I assume that is something that, again, I guess the question of how this is presented as we have to do something. So I guess the other component is, so right now we're renting space in Richmond for.
No, not yet.
So the vehicles or the adult school?
The vehicles and the staff. So all of the maintenance and grounds vehicles, staff, supervisors, et cetera, are all currently temporarily at the housed at the adult school. We're in negotiations for a facility in Richmond. It hasn't been finalized yet. It's been a little bit of a challenge, but every week we're having the commercial brokers update the surveys. And the unfortunate part of it is there's nothing that we're finding. There's just very little on the market. The biggest problem is we can find warehouse space. What we can't find is parking, warehouse space with enough surface parking. That's been the challenge. We found one facility that was move-in ready and available, but where it was in Oakland, the security risk was too great.
So it's
So
true
I
that it
think-
would be, oh, sorry, go ahead. Julie. Well, I was just gonna say that maybe this is where you were going, but in talking about this, an important part of it is how much it would cost to, I mean, it sounds like it's impossible because you can't find the space, but even just to continue renting.
It's going to be very
know.
expensive. The facility that we're looking at in Richmond, it's going through a sale right now, which is causing it to be reassessed, and the taxes are doubling. Because of that, we're looking at on a 5-year lease, we're looking at roughly $3.4 million for that facility alone. And then we have to factor in the office building that we're renting right now, which the cost of a new office building to purchase, I did factor into the ROM of 25 to 30 million.
So we need to pay that anyway, because this has to get built. So I think the question that I think is important for the board to understand is, in a long-term view, what the challenges are in the space search that you've done, that there's not a lot of space to purchase, to build, up. Because I mean, again, I would prefer to see this in West Berkeley, where it's a light industrial area, but at the same time, there is no buildable space or place that we can purchase. So I think it's important for the board to know that you've done your due diligence, that we don't just launch in kind of with this, but that there are questions about, like, where are the alternatives that we could have done, and why those are or aren't viable or too expensive in the long run, because we know we're going to have to rent for the next 5 years while this thing's getting built anyway. Correct.
And we've looked, and really since, shortly after I came on, I've been here over 3 years, we've been looking for property. We've only found 2 as potentials, and both of them is still, the sales have never gone through. One is Pacific Steel Casing. There's myriads of environmental issues, right? And the reality is we could purchase a lot cheaper if we go outside of Berkeley. But to use Berkeley taxpayer dollars to, one, purchase a facility outside of Berkeley is problematic. But then also the issue is, many of those cities, what you'll find is they actually don't want us operating permanently as far as buying a facility out of theirs, because we're not going to contribute to the tax base.
Well, I think it would be good to add, you're probably doing this anyway, but for the board, that part of the presentation, alternatives and the long-term cost of renting, the problem, the barrier, all the things you just explained, I think would be good context before you launch into what the suggestion is, for the recommendation is.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Oh, I remembered my last question, which there's nothing wrong with having these offices like in the middle of a parking garage.
No, so there would be 5 small offices, about 120 square feet each there, and that's for the supervisors, 2 maintenance, grounds, as well as 1 for the warehouse. I forget who the 5th one was, I'm sorry. But they would actually be on the uppermost level on one of the outer edges. So no, it's not an issue, because that was one of the things that L21 even asked, Local 21 asked of, you know, you're going to create these offices on the inside, no daylighting, et cetera. And that's actually not the plan.
Okay. And then, sorry, this is my last question. I forget, do we still not have a real plan for parking in the meantime? Like, not in the meantime, but during construction? For the staff?
There's the only option, and you know, one, there's the political questions about it, but then there's also the legality. And I'm researching the legality. I'm actually gonna have to call our bond counsel. But one of the things that has been requested is that we take the number of spots that are in that lot right now, which I think is 131. I have to double check. And we actually rent that number of spots in the Center Street garage for the duration of the construction. There's the political piece of it of, do you really want to spend bond funds in that manner? But then there's also the legal piece of it, because while we can definitely build a facility like this and offer parking to staff, when you're paying rent on parking, what I don't know is if that's a gift of public funds or if it's an acceptable use of bond funds. So I have to do a little more research on that.
Maybe that could be part of the swap with the city.
Unfortunately not. I spoke with the city already a while back about if we were to rent X number of spaces, could we get even a discount? And the way the bond was written specifically for the Center Street garage, they are not able to discount anything. The prices are fixed, they're set, the increases are fixed, et cetera.
But so is it the issue, like when we're renting out the Rhoda building, is that bond money or maintenance, or what's funding?
The Rhoda building.
Sorry, what's the building that we're renting for the offices now? In West
Oh, I don't know
Berkeley?
that it has a name. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, this is bond money, and it's an appropriate use of bond money.
Right, but so if we're renting space for that,
But
why
we're
can't we
renting
rate it
spaces.
for other stuff?
No, because we're renting space. We're renting spaces for offices that are supporting district, right?
Oh,
Whereas in the
okay, got
parking
it.
garage, it might be fine. I just want to make sure with
Yeah.
bond council, because then we're
Okay.
renting spaces for people's personal vehicles. So I don't know. I just don't. The last thing I want to do is do something and we have an audit finding, or we find that we're spending the money improperly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's no questions, this is actually only on for discussion, so which is fine. We can just bring it to the board, and if Julie and I, give that direction, basically. Are you thinking about it for what board meeting?
We'd really like to go to this next board meeting on the 9th. And the reason why is we've had to ask our bridging architect on the existing project for Milvia to press pause. And obviously each time we ask him to press pause, we fall backward in the queue. So a 2-month time delay could actually cost us 6 to 8 months in the long run. So the sooner we have this conversation, the better.
Okay, well, that's, I guess, up to, Dr. Stevens and Khadijah. It would be good if you had chance to talk offline with the other board members to give them a heads up, if it's really going to be as soon as next week.
Yeah.
So I guess, John, one of my reservations, which I think I maybe have mentioned before, is that there's been no public process on this.
Mm-hmm.
And the bond, the whole, the parking garage, that was all part of the discussions with the bond. Everybody knew that was happening. And I guess I'm a little nervous about, I understand the timing for the decision,
Yeah.
but I'm also concerned about the board making a decision without it being out in the public realm for any time for people to have a chance to talk about. So I don't know if it's a first and second reading, but I feel if we're looking at making a decision on the 9th, we haven't given the community any time to give feedback.
No, what I'd like to do is, I agree with you. While the ideal thing would be, let's put it on for the 9th, let's get a decision. And the reality is most of our facilities projects, we don't even talk about them. They go on consent, right? We vet them. I don't agree with that in this. What I'd like to do is bring it on the 9th as a discussion item, right? To actually invite public comment and also do a short presentation and have conversation with the board, but allow the board to hear public comment, allow the board to get feedback, and then bring it back on the 23rd as an action item.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Julie, does that make you more comfortable?
Yeah, and I'd like to make sure that we've actually communicated with the city council member of this district, Council Member Harrison, and like folks who will want to get the word out so that we're very transparent and people know what we're looking at having to do.
Yeah, and I can do that. And like I said, I apologize. I got sick. It just completely slid off.
Totally understand.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think also we should be prepared that nobody is going to, there's going to be very few like cheerleaders for this particular project, except people who know that we have to put these facilities somewhere. And maybe the high school is, likes the fact that they're across the street, but it's not immediately obvious to most of our constituents. Why this is a
the
good
problem
thing.
is no one will ever want to spend money on somewhere to house administration, and even less do they want to spend money on somewhere to house maintenance and operations, right? But I think the positive piece and the piece that we really do have to convey is if we look at it just from a fiscal responsibility position, we're doing this to really maximize and efficiently spend bond dollars and keep those costs down to a minimum. To me, that's the picture that we paint, and that's what we would talk about, because we're talking about a considerable difference of money.
Right, I agree with that. I also think though that we want to be really, we want to be good neighbors in the community, and we want to hear, I think we need people to understand the CEQA process, and that, we want to hear what mitigations we might need to do in order to make this work. And that we're open to that.
And we can incorporate a slide.
We also need to balance.
Yeah, we can incorporate a slide into the deck that talks about the CEQA process and what those mitigations are that we may need to incorporate and what will be considered. Happy to do that. And what I'm also going to do, since we only had the 2 reds and the 1 green, I am actually going to completely remove that section, so we don't have to have that conversation. Okay, because I do understand. I tried to be fair. I understand the picture that it paints.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right. Anything else?
No, so I have your direction then to go to the board as a discussion item first, a presentation, and then come back looking for action.
I mean, that's what we're saying, but it's up to the superintendent and the board president.
Yeah, him and I spoke already, and I'll be talking to him in the morning about this. So
okay, great. Thank you all. Thanks for being here. Thanks to our two attendees for being here as well.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you both making the time for this meeting. I'm sorry we couldn't do it at the last one.
That's okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Thanks for bringing it back.
Feel better. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.